What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
And on this episode of Educate Everyone, we continue our conversation with Dr. Dane Sawyer. He's an instructor in religion and philosophy at the University of La Verne. He has over 25 years of experience in leadership within urban education systems and professional organizations, and he's guided and supported new and transitioning leaders to serve competently with clear and aligned purpose and action. Now, here's Dr. Joe Atman and Dr. Dane Sawyer.
Everything that you do and encounter in life can at least be helped along by or informed through some sort of philosophical premise or some interpretation or experience or just knowledge about some philosophical topic. But that being said, you have to of course, approach everything with the idiosyncrasy and your own bent and slant on it. But if you got taught within the philosophical field properly, you know that you use it as a tool, and then you bring your own novelty to it and your own creativity. I wish that academia, especially at the higher levels, encouraged a little bit more as that creative thinking and people's own bents and slants and positions on things. But anyway, suffice it to say that just everything that I do every day, even at Middletree as a CEO, Middletree itself wouldn't be what it was had I not gotten the background in it, because our whole mission is based off of not only my own experience within academia, but what I came to understand about the nature and structure of it and what we could do to solve it, all of which wouldn't have been possible had I not had the education that I did. So, but even just on a day-to-day level, as an executive, I approach so many different things because of, again, the nature of the subject that we studied and just sort of love and fidelity to it. And yeah, I think a lot of people, if you do other things or have other focuses, which is great, but you don't maybe necessarily always take that approach to things, because it almost gets annoying for people who I work with or I'm close with. Something will come up and I say, well, but why? So I'm always questioning things.
Yeah, you captured something very close to my heart there. In fact, I often teach an intro to philosophy class, and what I often do is I will put a quote on the board, which captures a lot of what you just said, because I think you're basically right, which is philosophy is everywhere and philosophy is demanded of us everywhere. And so the quote is from Maurice Riesling, and it says, "Eventually life makes philosophers out of us all." The way I interpret that is that because we all face suffering, tragedy, challenges, ethical dilemmas, we have to figure out what we're going to believe and what we're going to do. And as soon as you step into that spot where you just are not in autopilot mode, but you're just at all thinking about what you're doing and how you're going to do it and how you're going to solve a problem, the seed of philosophy is just right there. And it's basically coming along. And so, I encourage students to say, this is, you're doing philosophy all the time. The question is just whether you're doing it well or not, whether you've had enough experience with going through some of these bigger questions and trying to figure things out. So it's definitely everywhere. And the irony is that even the history of philosophy was this. One of the ways that people think of philosophy is that it's the queen of the sciences. In history, there was a point when everyone just thought they were doing philosophy in some way or another. It's like you go into your English class or your rhetoric class and you're going to learn about Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos, which comes out of Aristotle's rhetoric. You're going to learn about the tragic flaw in your English class, which again comes out of Aristotle. And even you think about Isaac Newton, one of the most famous scientists of all time. And, if you look at the titles of his books, he talks about what he's doing is natural philosophy, even though he's a scientist. And there's a sense in which all of these disciplines are their own, but people don't even realize that they're sneaking in philosophy in a lot of ways they don't realize they're doing. And philosophy is there all around them in these different disciplines in unique ways. I think psychology is a good example. You mentioned it earlier because I'm very much in love with psychology almost as much as I'm in love with philosophy. You think about one of the mainstays in psychology is to study child development. And the idea is we want to know how children grow and how they develop so that we can raise flourishing people who can adapt and grow. But the question of what kind of children we want to have is an ethical question, which is the realm of philosophy. It's not a scientific question, like what kinds of kids we want to have, because we could create a society of violent, selfish, narcissistic individuals. And some of us think we're headed in that direction already anyway. But those are ethical questions about what we want to do. And so a lot of what even drives other disciplines like psychology are philosophical questions, ethical questions. So sometimes people don't even realize that they're kind of sneaking in philosophy in ways that they don't always recognize. And so, yeah, philosophy is everywhere. And I actually think that there is this kind of need or desire from it. And you can see it with, for example, some of the rise and popularities of some of the ancient philosophies like Stoicism, right? Like Stoicism has become another popular philosophy with people like Ryan Holiday and some of those popularizers. And you can see that people are yearning for something where they recognize that philosophy can be a kind of self-help. Like there's something to analyze that. There is something about philosophy that can be really enriching. And I think people are hungry for it. And I see that in students all the time. They don't realize that they really want it. So yeah. And as you said, like in terms of business, in my mind, you could counteract what I'm about to say here if you think I'm off base, but there's a sense in which like what helped get Middle Tree off the ground, even though maybe you probably had to go through all kinds of twists and turns and faced obstacles and challenges, was the fact that there was a philosophy animating it from the beginning. Without that philosophy, it's easier to just change what you're doing, your business model, to adapt to whatever you think is whatever needed. Whereas you have the philosophy behind it and it helps inform how things are going to be done. And obviously people recognize there's something valuable to what Middle Tree does as you've been able to expand and develop into the ways that you have. Feel free to react to that.
Yeah, Middle Tree wouldn't be what it is had I not had the educational background that I do, because I wouldn't have known that the issue that we're trying to tackle is making sure everyone has access to the education that they want and that they need and deserve, but that they are able to digest it in such a way that works for them. Whereas in the traditional school setting, it's a one-size-fits-all model. So, and I not had the background to understand philosophically that there are not only different learners, but different ways to think about things just in general. Where I think that sometimes at school, in the traditional school setting, and a lot of other actual subjects outside of philosophy, you're taught, well, this is what it is. And yet, of course, what is, given what we know about that subject, whatever it is. We used to believe so many different things, even in the hard sciences, about core principles or core tenets of those subjects that are altered given new information, new findings, new studies, new approaches, all that stuff. And it's not quite philosophy 101, but it's like philosophy 102 or 201, that things change, and they change given the way that you unpack them and approach them. And then through that unpacking, through that approach, your experience with them changes, and your capacity to digest, to observe, to interact with changes along with it. And then the subject matter maybe itself changes. But within the traditional system, you're taught, well, this is what it is. Spit that back out to us. Where, again, at Middle Tree, because of that aforementioned approach about making sure that everyone's learning styles are sussed out and figured out and allowed to blossom and develop and screw some things up and fail and retry some stuff, just because by the fact of our general approach, by giving students whatever time they need. And again, wouldn't have come up with that approach had I not had the background in philosophy that I do. But something that you said is that we all kind of do philosophy, whether or not we're aware of it. The PH at the beginning of everyone's PhD stands for philosophy, doctor of mathematics. You're the philosophy doctor of biology, whatever the case might be. So everybody's doing philosophy in one way or another. It used to be something that we prioritized within education, but it's barely there as a discipline anymore whatsoever. It's not a requirement. It's not something that we really even talk directly about with students at any age, where ironically, it's really kind of the building block of all education. So it's unfortunate that, and again, we're biased, but I think philosophy should be core to any educational experience, and yet it's hardly there at all on the educational landscape.
And that's one of the things I see so valuable about what you're doing with this podcast. I certainly would encourage the listeners to go back and check some of those early episodes and just all those past episodes where you really help clarify what you see are some of the short-sightedness of our modern education system. And I really couldn't agree more with a lot of what you're doing with military and with the way that you've outlined some of these problems. And on my side, we've focused so much on testing where you think of what's the motivation behind why you would have like an AP class. The idea is that theoretically, I'm diving deeper into this subject. If I dive deeper into it, I'm capturing more of being able to become a more well-rounded individual with more depth in terms of my knowledge and my skills. But it turns into like, let's just get as best of a score we can. It becomes about the score. And so then the knowledge itself becomes instrumental to something else. And the whole aspect of personal development gets kind of thrown out of it. So sometimes what I tell students and try to help them understand like what makes philosophy different, but is also a complementary piece to their own academic journey, their personal journey, is that there is a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Even though they overlap, they're different. And so we sometimes have this idea in education, like the empty head way of thinking about it, where we're just dumping skills and knowledge into someone's head and then they go out into the world. And what I say is, okay, fine, you can learn a bunch of skills, you can learn a bunch of knowledge, you can know a lot of things, but if you're not wise, if you don't have any wisdom, then you're going to be making all kinds of miscalculated errors and mistakes and just not really navigating life well. Wisdom, which of course, I know you know this, but maybe some of the listeners don't, but philosophy, the very root of the word means love of wisdom. And so it's this sense of being able to be like a well-rounded person. In my mind, the goal of an undergraduate education is not merely to come out with skills and knowledge and maybe a bit of expertise, but to come out with a sense of wisdom of knowing how to take on the world, to take on the world's challenges, to have some heuristics or ways or principles of figuring out how to make big decisions in life. And so, yeah, I often think that in principle, some of these things should work, but they often don't. So I often have these conversations with my college students. I remember an article I read by, I think the author was Katie Bramowitz, and maybe I got that name a little bit off, but where she analyzed like these different reasons for why people say they go to college. And they basically boiled down to these 4 mental models. One was what is called the inertial model. And basically it's like, I'm going to college because that's the next step after high school. My parents have told me to do it. The next one is instrumental reasons you're going to college, which is basically to get a job, to get a career. And there's a lot of students that go in with only those 2 pieces. And again, in my mind, yes, you are going to college to prepare pre-professionally in some sense. But if that's the only reason you're going there, then you're also going to miss out on these other 2 models, which help really capture a bit of the value of what philosophy has, but also value of an education. So the other 2 are exploratory. You go to college to explore new ideas, to meet new people, to really engage in life in a way that you weren't able to do before. And the last one is transformational. You go there for self-development and communal development. So what I often tell students is, if you're here simply because your parents told you that this is the next step after high school, or you're here simply because you think this is what you need to do to get a job, then you're not going to enjoy your education as much as if you also consider that sense in which exploring and transforming is a fundamental piece of this journey too. So the way I put it is like, yeah, you're here for professional development, but you're here for personal development. And that's where, again, this distinction between knowledge versus wisdom, I think, comes in. And that's where I always have found the utmost importance of a discipline like philosophy. It can be that other side of it. At the end of a semester, maybe you take a class and you move on to the next class. But what studying religion and theology and philosophy do is they allow you to ask questions that aren't going to be answered in just a single semester or on a single exam. These are questions you're going to continue to ask yourself after this class, next semester, next year, and after you graduate. And that's where I think the value definitely comes in for sure. And I can see that with, again, just the way you talk about middle tree and the way that you've established it. You think about the way that you're structuring instruction. And yes, you're obviously helping students get grades, but you're helping them develop these additional skills and trying to find that intrinsic motivation to get people to do things too. Once they can see that they can do something well, that before they just thought, oh, this is just a grade, or this is just a class or something like that.
I think we have to ask people, why do they think education is important? And what do they want out of it? Because it's not really a question that's posited to students at any stage. And I get that at elementary levels with really young students, that question or the nature of that question takes on a slightly different formation. But at some point, we need to start asking people, what do you expect from your own education? Why do you want to continue to get an education? What do you want to do with your life where this is going to be valuable? It's not something we examine with our students. We hope that we at least open up a door for folks to be able to do that. But again, just in general and traditionally, that's not part of the process. And it would be great if it was, and if we opened it up, because I think a lot of people do just go about the business of education or just go to that next step because that's what's expected, or that's just the inertia of their path or what they think that it should be, not necessarily always what they want it to be or what would even be best for them. I'm not saying that education isn't of benefit to everyone at every stage. It is, but the quality, the caliber of education is going to be different for everyone based on who they are. You were mentioning before that you guys have a very different approach with your students at La Verne than a lot of other universities do. A lot of people, I think a lot of students are opting out of those more prestigious universities or those larger institutions to get experience that is more in line with who they are as students and as people. And wouldn't it be great if we were able to provide that on all levels for our students, from the time that they step into a classroom for that very first time to the day that they graduate? I think it's something that we really fail at so far as education as a entire practice in providing those options for students. And again, I think how we think about this whole problem is an important task to undertake. And again, we're biased, but I think our background, a unique eye into not only this problem, but some others that kind of orbit it. But it all kind of comes back to how do we want to make people and a better society from there. I think philosophy, that is a core component to what its aim is and what it should be going forward. And I just wish we implemented that more readily and saturated ourselves with that more frequently within every rung of the ladder of education.
Yeah, you definitely have my vote there. That would be my ideal, idea. Really capturing that where, students come to La Verne, and La Verne is a liberal arts institution. And I asked students, when you hear the word liberal and you hear the word arts in there, like, what do you think it means? Because a lot of students actually don't even understand the whole point of what a liberal arts education is. Just so they think liberal and they think, oh, well, that's the opposite of conservative. And arts, oh, okay, well, that has to do with drawing and, maybe painting or stuff like that, music. And it's like, hold on, like this is actually much bigger. Liberal is related to the word freedom, where we get like liberty. This is liberal as in general. Right. So you think of this as the general arts, the arts that allow to free you. But then the arts here is more like the skill expertise, where you think of like the art of teaching or the art of coaching or the art of parenting or the art of war. It's like it has to do with that skill and expertise. So yeah, like the idea is you're going to get a general skill expertise, because the idea is when you come out of college that you're not going to be just have some knowledge or some information, but you'll be a well-rounded person. So I try to introduce that to students to help get that moving. And like I said, there is some move in this. I teach in the honors department, as I had said, and we do a class that's called Honors Colloquium 1 that I've taught the last couple of years. And the class actually combines ethical reasoning and career readiness. And it has been a lot of fun to teach, because it's like teaching students about ethical dilemmas, and they're going to find them in their workplace and how to think about ethical dilemmas everywhere and around you. But also it's combined with this career readiness, where they have to do things like create resumes, maybe do a mock interview, create a career map, visit people in career services, learn how to check out internships and stuff like that. And one of the things that happens every single semester with this class is students, they often come in with a very narrow sense of, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a doctor or something like that. But then you have this student who's on the cross country team, and they just told that they're going to be a doctor. And now you have this love and interest in running. What if you were a foot doctor, or like some kind of sports doctor in some way? And you kind of just help them. Like, I hadn't even thought about that. Are there internships? Can you do this? And so sometimes students don't even realize that they can combine these two loves in ways that are actually creating new fields or can capture both their interest and something that's like very, very practical. Yeah, I wish more of that was being done, because sometimes people just think, I'm just doing this kind of random thing and it's going to make me money. But a grade does not equal mastery. You can get a good grade in a class and didn't learn anything, and you get to see it in a class and you worked your butt off and you learned more than you ever learned in that class, even though you got to see in it. So I really try to encourage students to focus less on the grade, even though they care about it, especially those honor students, and start to really focus more on that personal development, those opportunities to grow and to explore and transform. And that's what I see Middle Tree doing too. You guys are really trying to capture both sides of this coin, which I think is great, which is why it's so useful and so important right now as we still continue to struggle with trying to figure out how to do education in America.
Well, I appreciate that, Dane, and I appreciate everything that you've done for us and in support of us from day one of your involvement with us to this very conversation. I think we need to have another formal conversation on the record on Educate Everyone in the future. So if you wouldn't mind coming back, that would be great.
It'd be my pleasure.
And now the Middle Tree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middle Tree's executive assistant. Some students feel overwhelmed by a big pile of homework, and the stress can lead to procrastination. One solution is the homework menu. Have your child write down all their assignments, then pick the order they want to complete them. Maybe they want to start with something easy, like a warm-up, or tackle the hardest subject first. Giving them the choice makes the workload feel less like a burden and more like a plan they control. And that's the Middle Tree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. Joe, in the book, you talk a lot about the process of becoming. So why is that such an important theme for you?
Well, I think it's an important theme for all of us. And I think it's something that I wanted to address quite explicitly in this work, because becoming itself is something that we don't pay a lot of attention to in our general lives. And yet all of us seem to have this pressing desire to become. I want to become wealthy. I want to have this job. I want to have this type of relationship. It's all about this process of obtaining and, by extension, becoming. Really, at the end of it all, the process of attaining is one of becoming, because we attain this and we assume that through that attainment, we'll have a different experience. And yet, this is not the first time anybody is going to hear this from me. Frequently, people find out that once they've obtained that thing that they were striving for, nothing really changes, because nothing within us, within that person, within all of us, has really changed by external circumstances. And again, that's not a new notion by any stretch of the imagination. But the question is why do we want to become in the first place? What are we striving for? And why are we striving? Why is there not contentment in general just baked into us? Why are we always looking to become? Because anytime we wish to become, we're really seeking out some hope to, like I said before, to gain something. So what is it that we think that we've lost? Or what is it within us that we think we need to recapture? I think you could make the argument that a lot of those kind of modern existential crises come directly from this notion that we've lost something. So something I wanted to explore was, what is that something? Have we lost some connectivity to something that we can call and point to as something more original about who we are as a people, or as a being, as a human being? And if so, what is that? And if not, what is that? So the question is, why do we want to become in the first place? What are we trying to gain? And again, if we're trying to gain something, it means that we're incomplete, we're unwhole, or that we've lost something in general. So why is it that we want to become is an inherently important question in pretty much any inquiry, especially one of the philosophical nature. And it was something I wanted to take a really deep dive into here.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.